It's no secret that Rising Rampage isn't the greatest set ever released, especially from a value standpoint. It is extremely difficult to make your money back on a box, unless of course you pull one of those ever elusive platinum foils. I don't know exactly what they're calling them, but outside of pulling those cards, it's very difficult to actually make your money back. So a lot of people have not been buying boxes, a lot of people have just been buying singles, and that absolutely is the way to go. And a lot of people are picking up cards that they think might be good in the future, and in today's video, I'm going to talk about cards that I think fall under that category. The cards that I'm going to talk about are cards that I haven't seen a ton of discussion about. That's not saying there's no discussion about them, but these are cards that I feel are very underrated from this set, and they're not very expensive in most cases. And of course, if you'd like to purchase any of the cards that I'm talking about in today's video, all of which I feel are hidden gems, make sure to use my link to tcgplayer.com, which will be in the description below. If you use that, it helps out the channel, and that's really cool, and you guys have been killing it lately, so I highly recommend you check out that link and buy some of these cards or whatever cards you might need for the upcoming events. The first card that I want to talk about is Mecha Orochi, the Serpentron Sky Slasher, and yes, that is a very long and confusing name, but not only does this card have a weird name, it also has kind of some weird effects. So this is a level 8 Dark Machine monster with 2450 attack and defense, kind of a weird set of numbers there, and I mean Dark Machine gives you a lot of synergies and different strategies, but also this card's effect says if this card is in your hand or graveyard as a quick effect, you can banish 8 cards from the top of your deck face down to special summon it. So that's a quick effect that just brings it out every single turn as long as you can banish 8 cards. And then it says you can banish 3 cards from your extra deck face down, then target one face-up monster on the field to destroy it. The biggest issue with this card is the last line, which says you can only use one of these effects per turn and only once that turn. That means it's a hard once per turn effect. And I think the direct comparison a lot of people make about this card, which is weird for a few reasons, but I think a lot of people think of Orbital Hydrolaner, and the reason is that Orbital Hydrolaner has a very weird summoning condition, and also it destroys a card. The big difference, and this is a pretty big difference, is that this card's quick effect is the special summon and the non-quick effect is the destruction. Orbital Hydrolaner was the exact opposite. You special summon it as a spell speed 1, and then the quick effect was destroying a card. This thing also really wouldn't go in the type of decks that would play Orbital Hydrolaner, because this thing just wants a lot of cards to be able to banish to bring out over and over again. To summon this thing, you need to not really care about what's in your deck, and to use its effect that blows up cards, you need to not care about what's in your extra deck. So while that might seem very limiting, you actually can do some pretty cool stuff with this card in decks that are playing things like Green Maju, and that is a really cool rogue strategy. To me, instead of comparing this card to Orbital Hydrolaner, I compare it to Eater of Millions. Both cards ask you to banish cards face down to bring them out, although in this card's case, it's banishing it from the main deck. But I do think there's a strategy out there that could maybe play this and Eater of Millions and maybe even Green Maju, and that could be a pretty cool rogue deck. The big appeal of this card is that it basically can come back every single turn, especially if you have a lot of cards in your deck. Maybe you even go crazy enough to play more than 40 cards just to bring this thing out consistently over and over again. Anytime there's a card out there that can bring itself out pretty much every single turn, we definitely want to give it a second look, and I also think that being a level 8 monster has some unique applications by maybe turning into rank 8s in the right strategy. What makes a card like Spirit Sculptor so appealing is that technically, in theory, you can search almost any Yu-Gi-Oh monster in the entire game. These days, we get a lot of searcher effects in the game. We see a lot of searchers for themes or archetypes. What makes Spirit Sculptor so unique is that it actually can search almost anything because it's just tied to attack and defense. This is a light fairy effect monster that has 1600 attack and 2100 defense, which is very, very critical, and it says you contribute one monster, add one monster from your deck to the hand whose combined original attack and defense equals the combined original attack and defense of the attributed monster, and it's a hard once per turn effect. So the basic level of understanding that you need to have with this card is that you contribute itself to search a whole list of monsters, and I'm not saying that all the monsters that I can search are good, but it's anything that with a combined attack and defense of 3700, possibly like Necrozabrionic or Dark Samorg. Not saying you would necessarily have to play those in a deck with this card, but I think that one of the big advantages of this thing is that you can search things by tributing itself. Sure, you can go out there and try to find all the monsters that have a combined attack and defense of 3700, and that might be useful, but where this card really comes in clutch is that you can tribute any random monster and then add other cards to your hand. It actually reminds me a lot of a card that saw play in Duel Links back when I played that game, and it's Card of the Soul. And Card of the Soul says look at your deck, and if you do, you can add one monster from your deck to your hand whose sum of attack and defense equals your life points, and it's a hard once per turn effect. This card doesn't only work in the TCG because you start with 8,000 life points, but in Duel Links it is pretty decent in some decks because you only start with 4,000 life points. In the same way, I think that Spirit Sculptor does have some potential, actually a lot of potential. There's a lot of stuff you can do. For example, if a card's attack and defense equal 1800, you contribute it to then add a hand trap like Ash Blossom or Ghost Ogre to your hand. I think this card might not be super strong right now. There might not be the right deck for it, but definitely in the future, if there's a deck with a really specific combo using this card or several specific combos using this card, I think it could see a lot of play in the future. And that brings us to the third card that I want to talk about, which is White Howling. And oh my gosh, I didn't even believe this card when I read it. I can't believe people aren't talking about this card more. This is a normal trap card that says if you control a water monster, target one spell in your opponent's graveyard, banish it, and if you do, for the rest of this turn, negate all spell effects on your opponent's field. So this is basically like a super powerful magic deflector, aka one turn Imperial Order. And oh my gosh, is this card incredibly powerful in any deck playing water monsters. I mean, already this card seems like a natural fit in any Frog Paleozoic deck, but it's not just that. I feel like an Orcus Mermail deck could take advantage of this thing. Obviously it's strong against decks like Skystakers, but even decks like Orcus play a lot of spells to get their engine going, and overall this card just seems super strong. It does not negate the first spell card your opponent plays, of course, because they have to have one spell card in the graveyard already, but against decks with a lot of spell cards, this seems like an auto include as an easy counter and just stuns them for one entire turn. Basically, the only way this card won't be played immediately is if there's not a deck actually playing enough water monsters to take advantage of it, but mark my words, this card will see competitive play someday, just whenever a water deck comes around. It doesn't have to be a meta deck, it might just be a rogue deck like Frog Paleos. Speaking of which, I mean, Frog Paleos with the Marincess support, which I'm not really talking about in this video, but that deck seems really strong as a rogue contender going forward. They have the Marincess cards, they have this White Howling card, they have 3 Solemn Judgment. Don't sleep on Frog Paleozoics because they could be a big contender as a rogue deck in the upcoming format. Next up, we have Volt Tester, and this card's kind of tricky to explain. It also has some weird text that we haven't really seen on a lot of cards. So this thing is a Dark Thunder effect monster with 2500 attack and 1000 defense, and it says if this card is special summoned to a zone a link monster points to, destroy all link monsters that point to this card, then destroy all other monsters those link monsters pointed to, and follow the link arrows of all those destroyed monsters, destroying everything they point to and repeating the process until there are no more to destroy. This card cannot be destroyed by this effect, and it's a hard once per turn. So that effect sounds a little bit weird, and like I said, there's some text in here like repeating the process until there's no more to destroy that we've never really seen in a card, but it basically works like this. If your opponent had a Decode Talker pointing to a couple things, if you special summon the Volt Tester with like Monster Reborn or whatever, it would destroy the Decode Talker, and then it would destroy what the Decode Talker pointed to, and if the Decode Talker pointed to a card like Nightmare Phoenix, and that Nightmare Phoenix was also pointing to a card, that card would be destroyed as well. Basically, you just follow the arrows of whatever was pointing to this card when it was special summoned, and all of those linked monsters are destroyed, and that is a really powerful sort of Regeki type effect. Especially if a deck comes out that can special summon Thunder monsters easily, not just Thunder Dragon monsters, but just like Thunder monsters generically, this card could be pretty powerful as a one-of in that strategy, and I think it's a card to look out for in the future. That brings us to the last card, and actually my favorite card out of the entire set, Get Out. This is a trap card, a normal trap card that says target 2 monsters your opponent controls that were special summoned from the extra deck, shuffle them into the deck, and then it's a hard once per turn. So this card is basically a super compulsory evacuation device, and that's why I like it so much. It seems very powerful going second, especially against big boards full of extra deck monsters. It's not necessarily only good against Thunder Dragons, but certainly this card has a ton of applications against that deck. Maybe if you set like Get Out and a Solemn Strike, or really any piece of effect negation, you can activate Get Out, your opponent tries to negate it with Hot Red Dragon Archfiend, and then you just negate that with a Solemn Strike, and now you've taken out a bunch of their cards. They don't really have a ton of recovery once you break their initial board, so against those decks, this card seems very strong. But just in general, I mean, extra deck monsters are everywhere, and this card isn't only good against things like Synchros and Xyz and Lynx or whatever. You can actually even use this card against Pendulum monsters that were special summoned from the extra deck, and that could be very valuable if Pendulums end up being a top contender this format. I feel like Get Out is a card that only gets better with age. People are always going to be special summoning multiple extra deck monsters, just how the game works these days, and this seems seems like an excellent counter to those strategies and a huge boost to decks using trap cards. Anyway though, that's gonna wrap up today's video on these 5 hidden gems from Rising Rampage. I'm not gonna lie to you guys, that Rising Rampage is an amazing set, but there are certainly some hidden gems like these cards that people really haven't been talking about. If you'd like to purchase any of these cards, like I mentioned at the beginning of this video, please use my link to tcgplayer.com, which is in the description below. Anyway, I'll see you guys later. Thank you so much for watching. Goodbye.